Our final mix for Eng 3000 covers international engineering and the differences in registration worldwide. So we've spent the semester looking at engineering in Ontario and across Canada, where there's a fairly good level of synergy between each province, although each province regulates its own type of engineering. Internationally, you'll see that there's actually a fairly wide difference in how engineers and engineering are regarded. So in the US, there is a term referred to as professional engineer, PE, which is regulated state by state, similarly to Canadian province-wide, but there's no cross-state transferability of the title. And the constraints around using the term engineer are not the same as in Canada. In Latin America, the ING name is based on one's studies, not based on the professional exams that we have here. In Africa, the professional engineer designation comes from having an engineering or science and engineering degree plus experience, similar to Canadian experience. But within Africa, this is currently only really active in South Africa. So the African experience in general is less strong. In Asia, there is a mixture of ex-empire examples of the chartered engineer, which has traditionally been built from the UK Royal Charters, professional engineering status, and some homegrown professional engineering statuses, for example, in Japan. In Australia and New Zealand, there is a chartered professional engineer, which is somewhat of a hybrid between two systems. In Europe, as with a lot of the rest of the world, there is often no formal regulation or registration of engineering. You can call yourself an engineer whether or not you've studied engineering in a number of places. You can be an actual engineer without needing to have a formal registration as a professional engineer. There are a number of professional engineering options available to engineers in Europe. They are not compulsory. However, they can help in terms of standing up for the ethical basis that a professional engineer in Canada would stand up. In Europe as a whole, there is a European engineer and a European professional engineer designation. Within the UK, the chartered engineer and incorporated engineer designations are regulated not by a province or a region in the UK, but rather by discipline. So, for example, I, in addition to being a professional engineer in Canada, am a chartered engineer registered in the UK. I was licensed by the Royal Aeronautical Society and am therefore a member of the Royal Aeronautical Society. I can also then use the chartered engineering status that Engineers UK gives me because of the attribution that Royal Aeronautical Society designated. In Germany, the titles of engineer and diploma engineer are based on your degree, not on the formal qualification thereafter. However, the degrees in Germany in engineering are typically quite a lot longer than other places in Europe. In Italy, again, the title is based on your degree. Similarly in Norway, Sweden, and Czechia. So the title is often more closely related to your academic experience than your work experience. So, of course, this poses some interesting challenges when it comes to international mobility for engineers. The Washington Accord that we talked about way back at the beginning deals with academic equivalence between engineering degrees. There is a desire to allow engineers to travel across borders beyond just recognizing the academic qualifications. And so a group called the Engineers Mobility Forum has basically agreed to explore how experienced engineers can actually travel and be allowed to operate as engineers in countries where the term is more tightly regulated. There is basically an international register of professional engineers that has resulted from this EMF group, which aims to make it easier for engineers to travel internationally. There are currently 14 countries who've signed up to the EMF. Canada is a signatory. Each country maintains its own international engineering register, and each of those registers internationally is then shared between the 14 signatories. The elements that allow you to be included in that register, you have to go through an application process that's somewhat more onerous than the application process, for example, for a PhD in Canada. You have to achieve academic achievements similar to the terms of the Washington Accord, which is the same as for a PhD. You have to be eligible for independent practice, which is typically the requirement for a consulting engineer in Canada, which is more onerous than for a professional engineer. You have to have at least 7 years of practical experience, which is obviously higher than the 4 years under a PhD in Canada, 4 years of which at least there is a year under a PhD in Canada to be more precise. You have to have been in charge of significant engineering work for at least 2 of the 7 years. And you have to have a record of continuing professional development, which of course in Ontario, we don't have a formal register of continuing professional development under the PEO. The International Professional Engineer title still requires the engineers to follow the codes in the economy where they're practicing. They have to focus on health, safety and welfare, and they practice within their level of competence and area of competence. They have to be individually accountable for their actions, and they have to comply with domestic laws. And that might mean that the title INTPE, the International Professional Engineer, may have some restrictions in certain jurisdictions. So that concludes our office mix set for the Eng 3000 course. Hopefully you've enjoyed following along, and I look forward to seeing you in class soon.